if I go to here, I'm actually going to put on what we call slicers. Now, slicers enable the pivot table user, not the person creating it, because you know your way around it, but it enables the pivot table user to use the pivot table in a really easy way. And this is probably a really good introduction to how you will move on. When we get to the Power BI reporting, this is really how Power BI works. It works on slices effectively, and it's like using pivot tables, but in a little bit more depth. Now, if I click on one of these, that pivot table only relates to that data. So I can choose to show all of it or show my slicer based on that. So you can have multiple selections using your control key, or you can just clear all your filters in one go. Up at the top here, we have our slicer function and its report connections. Now what I can do is actually link it to both of those tables. So now I can click on that one and it would relate both of those tables to my slicer. Let's put another slicer on and a timeline. So if I go in to my pivot table, I find my slicer and I decide what I want to slice it by. Let's say that the job duration is important. No, that is not. So it's not the right one. So I'm going to do another slicer. You can choose what you like. Let's pick the site name again. And these are our site names here. We might want to pop that in somewhere for them to select from all those site names. Again, if I want to relate it, when I click on the slicer, I can do the report connections, so it's connected to both pivot tables. And then when I click on these, this relates to whatever I have selected, and I can use my control key to see how things work. So it's very interactive. I'm going to put in a timeline now. So if I go back here and put a timeline in, we've got that one date that we've used. What that does is it puts a timeline in, and it means that I can simply click on an area and say, only show me the data for that particular time range. So instead of having to use drop downs or anything like that, providing my dates are properly dates and they have been set out, then the timeline works really well. And I have a timeline report connection, so I can link it to both tables and I can use that. So if we now go to our view and we'll take the grid lines off and the formula bar, you can see now that that is a dashboard, exactly the same as maybe using your count ifs or your sum ifs, but instead it's using pivot table functionality. which if you learn how to use these, is the beginnings of moving into Power BI reporting. So if I had this pivot table here, maybe it was constantly being updated, I would set out my pivot table dashboard. I do need to consider them growing, of course, like I said. I put my slices on, I put any timelines on, I put any graphics, and it's very easy then to see the information very quickly when you are looking at that data.